Couldn't work out who.
Yeah.
Somebody's got their outside coat on there, Christine.
Christine.
Look as though they are outside. Or they are outside.
Here, look.
Oh, there's the rug coming out.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, well, you need to.
The line across it.
Well, only if the weather was.
How many have you got today, Christine?
Oh, my gloves not going to blanket.
That's lovely.
Colleen's on.
No, I'm all right.
All right. Yeah.
I've just talked to my sister-in-law. Said, "Oh, we won't be up to St Helens.
We have some friends.
We're going to have
Why
a,
does
we're
my
going to have
picture
a
say
happy
iPad
in the
and
spring.
everything?
We're going to make up our Christmas hampers. Strange and then.
Good idea.
See everybody else.
It doesn't matter when you celebrate, as long as you're
Think
together.
I'm wrong somewhere.
That is a brilliant idea.
What's
Yes.
that little Clara at the
Hello
top?
all.
Hi, Paul.
Clara at the top.
I can confirm we're now going live on YouTube
All right, oh, on YouTube.
successfully this week.
So you can see everybody that's on.
Yeah, there's an arrow at the end there.
Anybody else that way? No. Oh, Edward. Hello, Edward.
Hello.
It's always been sat there quietly in the
Hello, star of the show. Star of stage, screen, and St Catherine's Church. Labour Exchange, or the Labour Exchange.
That's it.
Hello, Bob.
Is that a cobweb there, Steve, in that corner?
Just move pictures on.
Hello, girls.
Oh,
Hi there.
Somebody else coming in.
Somebody's doorbell.
Hi.
The
What's
doorbell.
that list up there?
Oh, it's Richard. Let me move. No, I'm all right there.
that's because so we're clicking.
Steve's there. Steve.
Hiya.
Steve.
Richard's quiet. Can't hear you,
Everyone's gone
Richard.
quiet.
Hi, Sylvia.
Oh, okay.
Oh, Richard's
Did
back.
they recognise us?
Hello,
I
Richard.
don't know. I don't know. They said.
There's
Somebody's
Richard.
on holiday in the garden.
Hello.
Somebody with a coat on. Oh, because we've got to sit outside. You see, we're all not in each other's houses.
Irene.
So we're sitting out in Christine's garden.
With blankets round us.
Yes, well, yes.
No.
It's very
Gloves
good.
and blankets.
Hello there. Yes, we can see you now. Nice to see you. Oh, hello, Irene. I can see Irene. Irene's just joined us.
Got to be something.
Carol. Hello, Carol. Hi.
As we can
Hi.
see.
Hello, Irene. You
Hi,
all right?
Well,
All right.
Complete with a strategically placed flowers in the
A bit late
corner.
going on Zoom tomorrow.
Hello,
Oh,
Irene.
see it next time.
Hello.
Hello. Are you there? Yeah.
Yeah. Wait a minute. I'll show you.
Even all these people can do it. You're supposed to be the expert. You can't.
This is not the second
Oh, and that's
YouTube.
Oranges into the toilet.
Same number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's all right.
There's.
Oh.
Yeah, only halfway through though, isn't it?
Okay. You
Only
can see
halfway
them.
through.
These cosy people in their living room. The heating's on indoors.
See if
It's dry. We're not going to get this
No, that's
again.
fine.
Go with this.
Well,
if you
I've got a
want.
thick scarf on, so.
Mm.
That's
could
the
see
sort
David
of
and Jude
picture.
before. They can see us, but for some reason.
Yeah, there we are.
John, but
We've still got to
there's
work
nothing
out.
on the desk.
Keeps on disappearing.
Yes.
Lights will come on soon.
Are you all right, Gillian? That's not a cold, is it?
No.
No, it's
Get
a,
passed out.
it's a normal snivel.
My normal September, October sniffles. Yes.
Changing temperature.
Join the club.
Yeah.
See
Every
you, Steve.
year,
Yeah.
without
Sorry.
fail.
Right. Oh, there's another
Always
David.
another one.
The person joining us.
Oh,
It's
right.
actually joining the
Yeah.
group,
Hello,
isn't it?
David.
Dave. Yeah.
You put
Got
some
there
lovely
eventually.
photos on, Sylvia.
Sorry?
You put some beautiful photographs on.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're thoroughly enjoying them.
Yeah, you put our house on
Yeah.
Church Street
Yeah.
this
Good.
week.
Yes,
That's
that's
right.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a shame about the old cottages that were there.
So weren't those thatch
Those-
cottages beautiful?
Yeah, they were.
Oh,
But,
yeah.
I know. I can remember speaking to people. I mean, past who lived there who said they were very damp and very cold. And,
Yeah. Well, seemingly some of the bricks from those houses, those
Hi,
cottages,
Cynthia.
still
Hi there, Anne. Everyone.
Nice to see you.
Hello, Cynthia.
Which ones you have all?
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
It's gone quiet. What are you quiet for?
I'll tell her on
Yeah.
Facebook.
Red.
Hey, choose which people are on.
All right.
It's 7.
How do you choose who's on, folks?
I don't know. Well, most people were
Yeah.
informed.
That's
Um,
I never forget once I
Norton
walked into
were.
a
John
pub.
Jr.
We
said
were
he.
teachers' evening out. We
Jr.
walked
was
into a pub I'd never been into
debating.
before, and the woman standing behind the bar, she
Right.
said, "Oh, goodness, how did you get here so quick?" And we all went, "Well, we've just all come in different times, you know." She said, "No, you were on the television half an hour ago." It wasn't true. She said,
Yeah.
"Oh, you've got a double."
Do you
She
think
said,
we've got
"You've
everybody
a
here,
double," she
Sylvia?
said. It's just so funny.
you should have said Gillian, politician.
Got people tonight. There's people tonight who were on last time who were not here. weren't there? But,
Alan and Janet are not here. They're not.
Is it right?
Yeah, pretty, aren't they?
Yeah, they
well, it's
on
gone.
the fence. The
It's
one
gone
behind you,
7.
come on, you'll see it in the picture in a minute.
Kath.
It's gone 7. So,
Yeah.
you want to make a start? Okay, right. So, I'm going to start off with some notices. So, anyway, welcome and thank you for joining tonight's meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
Yes.
thank you. It's mainly to Paul and his wizardry. So let's start with thanking Edward Fogmore. We're going to have tales from his chaplaincy.
That as well.
More water with it.
One of which was at the George Eliot Hospital. Along with his wife Jane and 2 sons, of course. The Fogmores have been part of village life now for what, 30 years? I'd imagine.
31 years.
31, oh, yeah,
Mm.
nearly as long as us. So, well, as you could probably gathered by now, the plan for the rest of 220 is no meetings, really. Well, no physical meetings, just because of the size of the hall and, of course, the restrictions and everything. So, but we're going to keep in touch and we're going to keep trying best we can with everything.
Volume's not good, is it? I've got this up as high as it'll go.
It's,
Turn people's sound off.
Well, you
I can't hear you now.
Turned yourself off as well.
I've not touched it. Right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, good. Right. So the plan for the rest of 2020, which those who've received the email from Jeff will know, 5th of November, we've got our next meeting. So we're going to try and stick to the Thursday, first Thursday in the month. So we're doing the postal history of Burbage. A couple of months ago, I posted quite a bit on about the postal history of the village, and I've done a new talk on that. So that's for November, on the 5th of November. But Jeff will be sending out your reminders beforehand. And then, of course, in the 3rd of December, it should have been the Heritage Group's 20th anniversary. So some people are getting together to do a Burbage quiz ready for that night. So hopefully that will be sorted by then. So wait to hear about that. We were going to have a drink and a cake and that, so you'll have to just provide your own, I guess. The committee's meeting regularly to review the situation, and our next meeting is 28th of October. And one of the things we're doing is reviewing the programme for next year. Quite a lot of the speakers have decided that they would come if possible, but of course that's not happening. So we're going to review a programme, and anybody who's got any ideas for virtual meetings, it'd be great if you've got any suggestions. And hopefully sometime, God willing, we might all meet again. And we're working on the next newsletter, so that will be out sometimes, perhaps in about a month's time, hopefully before the next meeting. In September, on the 8th of September, John McNaughton was 80. And I took him a card from the group, and I did him a little tribute inside. It's a bit. I said, well, you can have your epilogue early, so he's having. So it's a dear John letter, and the committee decided I should read it. We'll put it in the newsletter. Dear John, on the occasion of your 80th birthday, I would personally, on behalf of Burbage Heritage Group, like to acknowledge what a great contribution you've made to the photographic and recorded history of Burbage. Born in the village, for many years you've collected the old photographs along with the excellent ones you've taken yourself. Thankfully, after many years, you managed to publish the Around Old Burbage books in 1980, followed by the Around Old Burbage the second time in 1983. On arriving in the village in 1987, I found your two books on sale at Hinkley Library, and over the years they've become my Burbage Bible, the first books to be consulted on all historical matters of the village. In 1990, I attended one of your old Burbage slideshows as a fundraiser for the Scouts, and I was hooked. By the time the Heritage Group was established in 2000, your name was a legend in the village. And when we held the Remember Your School Days exhibition in 2001, you freely gave of your time and resources to provide much of the photographic part of the display. We then followed this up by the first of the many Around Old Burbage slideshow nights. The first one at the Millennium Ball was a sellout, and we had to turn people away. I fondly remember the evenings, your pictures accompanied by the witty no holds barred dialogue, often accompanied by Eric Parker and Tom King on the front row, who often corrected you if you said anything that might not be accurate. Your annual shows then had to move to Hastings for a larger venue, and they really established the group both in an increase in membership and financially too. Along with the research of the late dear John Kendall, you made a great team which I've consulted hundreds of times. You and Mary have often welcomed us so generously to your home many times, spending hours looking over your Burbage photo collection. Although you've retired from your Around Old Burbage days, the group is privileged and grateful to have inherited your photo collection, which is put into almost daily use on our Heritage Facebook page, which now has over 1,400 members. We will, as a group, do our best to carry on the interest that you started over 40 years ago and hope to see you at the meetings, now hopefully enjoying some of the products of your labours. So, dear John, enjoy the day, you deserve it. Best wishes, Heritage Group. So, I was hoping Mary would log on tonight to so we could hear that, but he had it in a card anyway. Also, after 30 years, well, nearly 40 years, we've got the St Catherine's Churchyard survey has finally been indexed by Paul and Carol. I've been sat on it for about 20 years. The Women's Institute did it in 1982, but they never indexed it, so it's great now. So hopefully, I think you've about finished it, haven't you? Have you finished proofreading it yet? But this index, of course, only goes up to 1982. So perhaps one day we might be able to add the rest of it on from the burials since then. Also, Remembrance Sunday, as you may have read in the local Rock, it's going to be, they're discouraging people to attend, unfortunately, and the roads won't be shut. It's still got to be finalised, but hopefully we'll be able to get links, and it'll be filmed live. Anybody who wishes to lay wreaths before 11 o'clock, I think they've got to get in touch with the parish council and they'll be given a time slot earlier in the day. But there'll be more details at our November meeting, how that's going to progress. Leicestershire and Rutland Heritage Forum, to which our group belongs to, they also managed to produce an autumn newsletter, and thanks to Anne, she's put a little review of our Pew's Paddock meeting. It's called A Virtual Pims in the Paddock, and this can be accessed on YouTube. So we can, if you log on to YouTube, you can search for Burbage Heritage Group, and the presentation's listed on there. Also, the Congregational Church are planning on doing a coffee morning again outside in the car park this Saturday, being its farmers market, from 10 o'clock onwards. The last 2 months they've been blessed with good weather. I don't know what's happening this month, whether it'll be as good, but anyway, we're welcome to go and see if it is. They managed it very well the last 2 months. Friday, the 9th of October at Burbage War Memorial at 11 o'clock, the final 3 servicemen who fell in World War II will be remembered. As you probably know, we started this way back in 2014 on the anniversaries from the World War I, and we've carried on since. We'd have the schools there, representatives from executive in turn from various schools, but of course that can't happen now. So, but we're still doing it. We're still putting the biographies on Facebook, and at the last one, there was just a few members there. We've got to be careful almost. Well, we can't really advertise it, but hopefully you'll see that. So that neatly brings us in to remembering the World War II fallen. Paul filmed it, the last tribute at the memorial on the 22nd of November. So I think we're going to go into that now, aren't we, Paul? Followed by Edward's presentation. Thank you.
Good morning. Usually we would welcome pupils from Sketchley Hill, Burbage Infants and Burbage Junior Schools to the War Memorial, but in these difficult circumstances we all recognise that that is not possible. This morning we're remembering 6 servicemen from Burbage who died during World War II. In particular, these men died in a September month during that conflict. Sergeant Pilot Fred Howarth had joined the Royal Air Force Volunteer Reserve Force as a teenager and was called up immediately war was declared in September 1939. He began his training to become a fighter pilot in Cambridge and was then transferred to an airfield in Lincolnshire. Unfortunately, he was killed during a training exercise on the 3rd of September 1940. He is buried in St Catherine's Churchyard. Fred Howarth was 20 years old. Private Francis Pritchard originally hailed from Coventry, but his family was living in Lutterworth Road by 1939. Francis joins the Sherwood Foresters and is killed on the 6th of September 1944 in Italy. Francis is buried at the Coriano Ridge War Cemetery in Italy. Francis was 26 years old. We don't have a picture of Francis. Private Sidney Comer was born and educated in Burbage and was active at the Burbage Liberal Club and also the Congregational Football Club. He enlisted with the Leicestershire Regiment in May 1940. He married Cecily in 1942. Sidney was also part of the assault in Italy during 1944 and was killed on the 15th of September that year, and is buried at the Gradari War Cemetery in Italy. Sidney was 30 years old. Driver Leslie Jones was born in Burbage to parents who lived in the Horsepool. Leslie was assigned to the headquarters of the 1st Airborne Division of the Royal Army Service Corps and was killed on the 20th of September 1944 at Arnhem, and he is buried at the Oosterbeek War Cemetery in the Netherlands. Leslie was 21 years old. Driver Stanley Clark was born in 1910 and joined his father working at Sketchley Dye Works after leaving school. After enlistment, Stanley was assigned to the 310th Armoured Brigade of the Royal Army Service Corps and was also killed on the 20th of September 1944 in one of the forward advances following the D-Day landings in May of that year. Stanley is buried at the Groesbeek War Memorial Cemetery, also in the Netherlands. Stanley was 33 years old. Gunner Geoffrey Tite was born and educated in Burbage and lived with his family in Windsor Street. Prior to enlistment in 1939, Geoffrey worked as a gardener for Mr. Flavel of Lutterworth Road. After enlistment, Geoffrey was posted to several training places around the British Isles: Norfolk, Salisbury Plain, Howick on the Scottish borders, and finally Snowdonia, before embarking for the Far East and arriving in Singapore at the beginning of 1942, shortly before the Japanese overran the whole peninsula. Taken prisoner, Geoffrey was one of the thousands of men working on the Burma Railway under extreme conditions. Geoffrey died on the 22nd of September 1943, 77 years ago today, from dysentery and malnutrition. Geoffrey was 24 years old and is buried at the Chung Kai War Cemetery in Thailand. We remember these men for their sacrifice and duty during that terrible time.
Thank you, that was lovely, Anne. I'm glad we can film it anyway, so it's good posterity now. So right, now then, can we get on with Edward's talk?
Yeah, it's over to me, is it?
Yeah, over to you, thank you.
Right. Evening, everyone.
Evening.
Jane and I send our regards and thanks to Sylvia. Thanks to Anne Crabtree and the team for your invitation. To be with you in any way is a bonus at this time. I hope you're coping in the Zoom zone and under these continuing restrictions. Thanks to Paul again for his technical help with the photographs and the Zoom among Zooms. Thank you. There you have the title, Tales from His Chaplaincies, Whole Care in Every Generation at the George Eliot Hospital and elsewhere. And I'm proud to be of Burbage, adopted, Jane and I both, and much to give thanks for. And it's great to be invited by the Heritage Group because we've been part of it for quite a long while, and one way or another. Today, I'm sharing with you the role of chaplaincy in healthcare in the NHS, in hospital, in hospice care, and community contexts. I'll give a historic overview as well, which will present to us our local situation because George Eliot obviously covers part of southwest Leicestershire, particularly in maternity services and A&E and general medical care. I'll give a reflection, if you like, of, because concentrating on North Warwickshire, it'll give us some insight into how healthcare has developed in the nation and also internationally. I think we've got the first picture here, Paul, of a heritage rose. That's one of the Burbage roses. Is it Mr. Robbins who took care of that?
Robinson, obviously.
Or Robinson.
Yeah.
Mr. Robinson, that's it. It's still budding and blooming. That was taken a couple of weeks ago in the back garden.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, John got them, didn't he? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the heritage rose.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So still budding and blooming.
Right. Oh, someone must put there. Yeah.
Yes. The core of heritage, from its meaning, is an inheritance. And of course, in Burbage, we've got a rich inheritance. Health is part of our inheritance. Next to the weather, health is very much part of our everyday conversations. The core of health, in its definition, is a sense of well-being in body, mind, and spirit. To find health on any level is being given the strength to be purposeful, and so we can contribute for the good of our family, community, and the wider world. Otherwise, what is the quest for health for? In the Christian context and the Judeo-Christian tradition, the core of our heritage comes from the Old Testament book of Proverbs. Proverbs is always good fun to go back to. And Proverbs 13:22, God's love remains your heritage. And it is our veritas, it is our truth. And I think that in the second slide, we see the figure of the resurrected Christ, which is the figure that was commissioned for the chapel at the George Eliot Hospital from John Letts. When I was appointed as chaplain in 1989, one of the first things I did was to inquire whether there was a sculptor in the locality, and I was told that John Letts was the person who'd done the George Eliot's statue for the centre of Nuneaton, and also he'd done Mother and Child in the George Eliot. And so I rang him up my first day, and he said, I've just taken a piece in clay down from the shelf, which I hadn't seen for 6 months. And I was wondering where that was going, and I now know where it's going. And so I went out that afternoon to his studio, Astley, and there we were, faced with the risen Christ, and just wanted a focus for the first temporary chapel. We had 3 temporary chapels at the George Eliot. And so that sculpture has been with me, and I looked at him for over 25 years every morning. We'll keep that slide on. The foundations of Christian healthcare chaplaincy and its essence is found in the story of the life of St. Martin of Tours. Its seeds go back to Martin 316 to 397 AD, a Roman soldier who shared his military cloak with a beggar freezing in the winter by the gates of Amiens in France. He shared his cloak by cutting it in half to meet the personal need of the beggar. Love your neighbour as yourself. The nobility of the time were appalled by this act of love. The Latin word for cloak is palliar, hence the root of palliative care, covering the whole needs of the person and the family of body, mind, and spirit. Martin's cloak became a holy relic, and the priests who cared for it were called in French capelain, which is the root of chaplain, and the word chapel comes from the same root. And part of my title today is Life as a Healthcare Chaplain, Whole Care in Every Generation. And Martin certainly showed whole care to the man in need. It was in October 1988 that Jane and I travelled up from Poole, where we were in parish ministry, for interview at the George Eliot Hospital. It was the first time that they had appointed a full-time chaplain there. I was appointed and started work on the 4th of April, 1989. And there was no chapel, and a lot of the admin officers in those days were in porter cabins, and that was my first existence there. In a very leaky porter cabin, I have to say. And I was rehoused in one of the manager's office who took pity on me. Fortunately, I looked up who George Eliot was before my interview. My places of work were at the George Eliot Hospital, the Manor Hospital, and Bramcote Hospital. I was also chaplain at the newly built Mary Ann Evans Hospice on the hospital site from 1990 to 1992. And I managed the mental health chaplaincy team at Chelmsley Wood, called Brooklands, and the chaplaincy team at Rugby St Cross. Can I have the next slide, Paul, please? The original infirmary goes back to the founding of Nuneaton Abbey. Basically in 1150, but the building was there in 1180 from the order of Fontevraud in Loire in France. The monks and nuns were overseen by the Abbess Agnes, and I always took delight when preaching at the abbey to remind them that even though they didn't accept females in the sanctuary, even to modern times, they actually had a lady in charge in 1180. So there's nothing new under the sun, really. The town was then called Etone, which means farmstead by a stream. Its population in 1332 was 900, and it was because of the care of the nuns of the locality that they actually put nun in the front of Etone, therefore becoming Nuneaton. The first community hospital in the town was to be the Manor Hospital. Next slide, please, Paul. It was founded in 1892 by public subscription and sited opposite the Abbey. At that time, they had a capacity for 131 patients, and community care is nothing new either. 4,581 home visits took place at that time. Typhoid, pneumonia, and bronchitis were prevalent in the community. On top of this development, nurse training slowly developed, and I was served, and it was mainly served by local GPs. In 1848, the public health boards were founded in the UK. Sanitation was improved by the appointment of a medical officer of health, the first being Dr. Richard Nason. Next slide, please, Paul. Richard Nason is right there in the front with his wife Matilda and the rest of the family. Can you see the top of the photograph there? Can you see the top of the photograph?
Yeah.
Let's have a look. That's all right. The Nason family, some of you will know that there's a Nason ward at the George Eliot, and this family were very much involved in looking after the improvement of public health in Nuneaton. And his son, Edward, slide 6. There he is, 1831 to 1896 was his father, and Edward followed on from him, carried on his work of sustaining the hospital through local fundraising for the 2 wards. At the official opening in September 1893, there was 1 matron, 2 trained nurses, and 2 servants. The on-call doctors gave their services free of charge. In the first year, there were 71 patients treated and 31 operations. To put it into regional context, the Leicester Royal was founded in 1771, Birmingham Hospital in 1792, and Coventry and Warwickshire hospitals came about in 1833. Next slide, please, Paul. The George Eliot Hospital grew out of the workhouse and the College for the Poor at the other end of town on the College Street, named after the college in the parish of Chilvers-Coton. The workhouse was built in 1722 and was largely demolished in 1963. The college followed in 1799 a gift from Arbury Hall's Sir Roger Newdigate for the poor to learn industrial skills. The chapel was part of that complex. Next slide, please, Paul. As can be seen in the picture, the chapel was panelled and decorated with ivy leaves on the pillars, and it appears furnished with probably the hardest pews in Christendom. It featured in George Eliot's book, Scenes of Clerical Life, with the Reverend Amos Barton preaching and pastoring there. Mary Ann Evans, George Eliot's father, Robert Evans, next slide, please. Worked for the Newdigates of Arbury Hall as estates manager and had some responsibility for the workhouse estate. In 1841, they had 159 inmates, which included 39 children, with a master and matron. In 1906, Poyser Ward block was built there with a ward for women and maternity and a men's ward. Milby House was built for the master and the matron. When I arrived in 1989, it was the office and admin for the general manager of the hospital. Also at that time, Poyser Ward block housed the small intensive care unit, and soon the rest of the old maternity ward became the halfway home assessment centre for the more mature. Pre-1989, chaplaincy was facilitated for the hospitals by local clergy visiting as required. Next slide, please, Paul. The Bramcote Hospital was built as an isolation hospital between 1904 and 1906 and was developed because of the prevalence of smallpox. However, tuberculosis, along with the prevalence of scarlet fever and rheumatic fever, was on the increase. There were 45 deaths from TB were recorded in 1911. And so Bramcote was utilised and sunshine treatment was prescribed with the outside balconies. It also rose to the challenges of Spanish flu after the First World War. By my time, Bramcote had seen its use go from the care of children in Horsborough Ward, and then latterly, before its closure in 2013 and 2011, 2 wards for the care of rehabilitation of older people. Between the World Wars, there was a development of pathology and X-ray facilities in Nuneaton. And the developed children's home by the workhouse. In 1929 and 1933, the first group of nurses were trained on the manor site. There were silver paper collections, and the carnival were started in 1931 with an ox roast to follow to fund any new initiative. It was very much hand to mouth in those days. In 1939, the workhouse still had 91 inmates, with 17 children in the nursery and 38 in the developed children's home. With the threat of war, the St John Ambulance members were drafted in to help in the hospitals. Some of the workhouse inmates were enlisted to help in the war effort. In 1940, the Mayor of Nuneaton raised a staggering £20,000 for the Nuneaton hospitals, which were in deficit by £4,000 at the beginning of that year. Over 100 people were treated from the Coventry Blitz in Nuneaton. We know a lot of the story of the development of the health service from 1948. My service in the NHS saw further rapid developments in the development of the George Eliot Hospital and the closure of the Manor Hospital in 1993. We had a grand ball inside the closed welfare wards to mark the closure of the manor. The men of the hospital were presented with commemorative ties. There we have it. And ladies were given brooches and we had commemorative mugs, and mine still survives general use. So Nuneaton Manor Hospital Centenary, 1893 to 1993. The official opening of phase 3, the Royal Wing at the George Eliot Hospital. Next slide, please, Paul. Opened in 1994, December the 8th, when the Queen came and with Prince Philip at her side. It was a £25 million extension of the facility. The Queen came to the chapel, the newly built chapel at the time. Prince Philip was visiting the orthopedic wards. And as the Queen left the chapel, she turned to her lady in waiting. She said, "Where's Philip?" And nobody knew where Philip was. I went to find out what had happened to Philip, and was told by the amputee patients in the surgical ward that they'd been regaling him with lots of stories about how they'd escaped the night before to the local hostelry. Prince Philip had got the joke that they said they'd gone out to get legless, which because he was so tickled by Nuneaton humour, he stayed and gave them some very rude stories to share. It was a magnificent day. We had a celebration lunch and celebrations of all sorts in the hospital to mark that event. The Queen spent a lot of time with us, and it was very much appreciated. And in the chapel, we had all the voluntary services, Anchor Radio, all the League of Friends, and also the maternity nurses, and the Queen was showed the Book of Remembrance for those who'd lost little ones. The completion of the chapel and the Chaplaincy Pastoral Centre was an extraordinary project, really. The chaplaincy building was a collaborative venture to which the Hospital League of Friends generously contributed 50-50 with the Health Authority. For 4 years, we'd improvised with 3 temporary chapels and 3 different offices. We coordinated a service to celebrate 100 years of the Manor Hospital in 1993 at the St Mary's Abbey, and with the children of the Manor School telling the story, acting out the developments and some of the main characters involved. The site is now utilised as the Manor GP surgery. The original facade was preserved after public protests by the local heritage group. They halted its demolition by lying down in front of the diggers. The facade is still in place today because of their sacrifice. Next slide, please, Paul. Within the Nuneaton hospitals, the development of the role of chaplaincy came about. The training of lay visitors and chaplains being appointed to part-time and full-time posts happened during the 90s. A team of 30 lay visitors would visit the wards on a weekly basis. They were trained to augment the chaplaincy work, and their local knowledge of the community was invaluable, and they reflect the geographical area covered. They reflected their Christian denominations, and latterly they represented the major faiths as well. The chaplain's role itself is varied and is under the auspices nationally of the College of Healthcare Chaplains, our professional body. By the end of my time in the NHS in 2014, we had chaplains representing Muslim, Sikh and Hindu faiths. And we developed an all-faith prayer room in the centre of the hospital, not far from the intensive care unit. Next slide, please, Paul. Can you move it on to the next one, to the Imam, please? We might go back to the other one. I worked with the Imam Abbas Khalifa for over 20 years, and latterly, he was a palliative care and mental health chaplain in North Warwickshire and in Birmingham. We used to give shared lectures to the third-year students at the Warwick Medical School on the role of chaplain and whole care. They couldn't get over the fact that a Christian priest and a Muslim imam should be working together so closely. It blew their minds, but they were very responsive. And because Abbas, who died just a couple of years ago, may he rest in peace, he was able to share with them that he was a kidney transplant patient, and all the vagaries of the NHS and all the good bits as well thrown into his stories, which shocked them enormously because he had intimate receiving end experience of the NHS. He was an extraordinary character, and we had a lot of adventures in pushing back boundaries in people's attitudes, indeed. The care of people who find they are patients in many different circumstances are at the centre of the chaplain's pastoral ministry of listening, support and facilitating different ceremonies. This involves the liaising with local clergy and all faith leaders. Staff teams are the continuity of any hospital, and the care of them is a vital part of the work. The privilege was to be part of the wider care team in whatever their role. This is from frontline care to behind the scenes of all diagnostic and rehabilitation therapies. Can you go back to the reflection photograph before that one? Thank you, Paul. The catering and portering teams, along with the estate teams, stores and social services and psychology, mortuary services, speech therapy, and occupational therapy. The management teams at every level were accessible, and we were able to develop pastoral care of staff members who had been bereaved and had a remembrance part of the chaplaincy garden, which was built at the same time as the chaplaincy centre and chapel. Our work started in the maternity and special care baby unit with the blessings of newborn and baptism of those who were particularly poorly and giving parental support. Parents always appreciated support. Those who experienced early loss were supported, and we had an annual service for the families and a book of remembrance in the chaplaincy. You can see the book of remembrance on the left-hand side of the photograph. You can see Globin the clown, who's in the outside garden. This is a reflection from the outside, but there's the book of remembrance just inside. And just to the center, you can see the adult book of remembrance also there. A patient one day called me up from one of the wards and said she got something for me to say thank you for all the care during her stay. And it was a passion flower. And there on the outside wall, you can see the passion flower just about to bud there. And there you can see blind Bartimaeus being healed in the central mural done by Carmel Klauke in the chapel there. The chapel was on the theme of touch, and the sculptures actually helped to illustrate that. Support of relatives also was carried out in the acute environment of accident and emergency. Intensive care, coronary care unit was integral to the work, and also the renal unit, which was next door latterly to the chaplaincy. Our chaplains specialise in different parts of the hospital as well as being generalists when they are on call. In the early days, in fact, for 8 years, I was on call for 24 hours a day, 5 days a week. You never knew what the call out would be, but very often it was in the extremes of life. It ranged from the end of life ceremonies of all ages to support of transplant families and staff, and after serious road accidents and all circumstances of sudden death. It was vital that we as a chaplaincy team looked after each other, and we had professional support because of the acute side of the work that we did together. Our day started with prayer, and that was shared with them wherever they were, and anybody else who wanted to link in with us at the hospital and in the community at 8:30 every morning. Some staff members attended this service before their shift or at the end of a long night. We had a midweek communion service in the chapel for all comers, as well as the Sunday mornings. St. John Ambulance cadets and officers helped to bring patients to the service on a Sunday. 2 slides on, please, Paul, for the hospice, please. Thank you. I was chaplain for the work of Mary Ann Evans Hospice from 1989 to 1991, when we appointed a part-time chaplain. Some people still don't realise locally that Mary Ann Evans is the real name of George Eliot. I know that George Eliot always wanted her name, George Eliot, to be above Mary Ann Evans. And she's never let anything published during her lifetime that had anything but George Eliot on it. But the name of Mary Ann was picked upon to personalise the importance of the work of George Eliot in highlighting the needs of the local community, which she wrote about a lot. I was on the board from 1991 and was vice chairman before serving 15 years as chairman after Bill Olner became MP for Nuneaton. He was the first chairman, and the hospice was built on top of his mayor's appeal when he was mayor of Nuneaton before he became MP. We had another royal visit in 1991 when Princess Anne opened the original hospice daycare centre, and then the subsequent expansion in June 1999 when the Duke of Gloucester officially opened the extension of his services. Since then, the bereavement service building, the Warren, has been open for all ages, opened in June 2014. Like Hospice at Home and Mary Ann Evans helped to pioneer new ways of working to meet local needs with a whole approach. We looked at doing a bedded unit in North Warwickshire, and we put a bid in for it, but Coventry got those beds. But we never regretted it, actually, because we've reached more people in the community where the majority of people wanted to be, hence the expansion of Hospice at Home. The work has seen the Hospice at Home service expand from 1995 to the present day, which is a 24-hour service working collaboratively with other agencies, including the NHS and voluntary services. Our retail arm also expanded with the opening of 5 shops in Coventry and North Warwickshire to pay towards this work and the daycare and lymphedema service. And we have a big furniture store now on the Weddington side of Nuneaton, which is very well supported. Full-time chaplains help to develop the pastoral care of the staff and patients and the development and management of the bereavement team. Meanwhile, as chaplains, there was a lot of work behind the scenes liaising with the unseen and unsung mortuary team, the coroners, the funeral directors, and the wider liaison with clergy of all faiths and voluntary services, giving support to the care of those living with dementia of all kinds and health-related challenges. We liaised with the local GP practice in Camp Hill from 2012 to 2014, and for 6 months developed a listening scheme for people referred for extra assessment and support from the chaplaincy team. Also in 2012, we developed the Oasis, which to this day at the George Eliot gives people relaxation and breathing exercises to those who are pre-op patients. They can then take those skills with them on leaving hospital. 20 staff and volunteers provided the service after accredited training. Some of the work entailed helping people to prepare for difficult times and the joy of recovery. The shock of health challenges is hard enough, but to work alongside people and families into the new world of revived health is a huge privilege. Next slide, please, Paul. When it came to the closure of Bramcote Hospital in 2010, we facilitated the staff team and the community in the farewell service, giving thanks for all the years of service and looking for the future of rehabilitation services. As you can imagine, it was a very emotional, as we distributed sunflowers to symbolize the growth of the work and its continuity in an ever-changing form, with the patients who were there at the time, those people, and also the staff who a lot came back for that service. We also helped the Trust to celebrate the milestones with a large service celebrating the 50th anniversary of the NHS. Part of the new chapel and chaplaincy was its garden, which you can see here, which has recently been expanded and continues to be a blessing to so many who can come to the hospital. And patients can be, in the better weather, wheeled out in their beds, actually, into that garden. Also, we worked with the wider community to develop a children's garden at Ouston Road Cemetery, and on the building of the new crematorium, a children's garden there for the support of families. With the development of the hospice, 1/3 of an acre of land was gifted, and so the garden was commissioned through the Morton Morrell Agricultural College design competition. We had 3 amazing finalists, and we actually made sure that each one of those designs was put into the garden, which you wouldn't believe you were anywhere near the George Eliot Hospital when you were around the back there, and those of you who've been will know what I mean. Mary, a lady who lived nearby, just over the back, who owned the piece of land, rang me up one day and said, Mr. Pogmore, can I have a word with you? So would you like to come round for tea this afternoon? And she said, I've only got one thing to say to you. I lost my husband just over a year ago, and it was his wish as a builder that the hospice should have this land. And I burst into tears because that land helped us to develop the garden, but also to expand the hospice and also to build the bereavement service building. She was an extraordinary lady. And it's acts of kindness like that which actually leave you speechless. And it's not very often that I'm speechless, except when I'm listening to others. Next slide, please, Paul. Finally, the last garden we developed was a herb garden in the maternity, just in the courtyard of the maternity hospital, to illustrate the medicinal uses of herbs in modern medicine and the link with the Abbey, who originally had a herb garden, which is quite small now, but they've revived it a bit since we did this herb garden. The wooden frame was built up by the prisoners of HMP Rye Hill near Rugby. They weren't allowed to come and see it, the finished article. They saw it and we sent pictures. But we were allowed to smuggle in some special cakes to the team who worked on it. And they were in floods of tears by the fact that we'd gone out of our way to say thank you and presented them certificates and photographs of the herb garden. It was one of the most moving projects I've ever worked on. And there it is in the shape of the fleur-de-lis, symbol of St. Mary, and therefore the Abbey. And it can be seen, and there's an explanation board in the maternity hospital there. Can we have the full-blown rose, please, Paul? That's when the little bud came out just literally 3 weeks ago. Heritage is very often misunderstood by a lot of people. But here we have the heritage rose in full bloom, and its aroma is just beautiful. Heritage in full bloom and onwards into the future gives texture and resilience for any future. That is what heritage does for us. It gives us context. And in the present times, we can see parallels within even the last 150 years of health challenges. The essence of chaplaincy from the earliest times has been from monastic times, based on teamwork. I've always enjoyed working with others in the common purpose. It's been from monastic times, based on teamwork. I've always enjoyed that because of the common purpose and the focus of health in all its forms. That brought together all the Christian denominations, all the faith groups, and those of faith and of no faith apparently at all. Times of laying on of hands and the ancient offering up of prayer through anointing and general intercession continues the heritage and efficacy of offering up to our Creator all that we have and all that we are. After retiring from the NHS in 2014, I've worked for the Abbeyfield Society, which have over 500 centres of care and sheltered housing in the UK and in 7 other countries. They asked me to develop chaplaincy across the organisation, which I did full time for until 2017-18, and then I've been mentoring the chaplains that we've appointed since. And I worked in the 1980s in Poole with Richard Cargom, who founded Abbeyfield. So it's sort of been full circle for me. Working with a man who was a tank commander in the war and then retired early from the army after 4 years in Palestine after the end of the Second World War, and spent the £250 of coming out of the army on the first sheltered house in Bermondsey in London. And 60 years on, that's how Abbeyfield developed. And there used to be an Abbeyfield in Nuneaton, which is now closed, but there are ones in Rugby and Coventry. So I covered the Midlands and Southwest on a pilot, and I did that for a year. And then we appointed others to join the work when it was accepted. And then I've worked for Missions to Seafarers with Thompson and Fred Olsen, where we've been, Jane and I have been able to go and have ministry on ships in different places in the last 3 years. So a different context, if you like, of chaplaincy, working with seafarers and working with people in the hospitality industry. We just got back before the COVID lockdown in March, just the week before lockdown. And you can imagine that we feel very strongly for those who are no longer able to actually give that sort of care all over the world. In every aspect of chaplaincy, whole care is at the centre, treating people as people, whatever their background. It is striving for unity in the human endeavour to support one another through thick and thin. Heritage, as you know, is to be cherished, not for its own sake. It is to be cherished and purposeful for a richer future, to know the context of being a human being in community, local and global. That is the heritage that we strive for, and I pray for the grace for all of us to fulfill the same. I think, Sylvia, might there be some time for questions?
Yes, please. If we could, anybody got any questions?
I better have something to drink, I think.
Have we struck you all dumb?
You need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, can you unmute?
That was very interesting. Thank you very much.
It was great. Yeah.
Real pleasure.
Yeah. Anybody want to add to this? Oh, Richard's clicking. Want to unmute? No. Right.
I don't think they know how to do it.
No, perhaps not. Could we have any indication on how you do it? Unmute.
Hello, Edward. It was really,
Hi,
really interesting. I've been taking notes because I always take some notes from all our meetings, and what I've written down will form part of the next newsletter that goes out. Obviously, all the work that you've done, which has been absolutely fantastic. So I'm not sure that I've got every detail and date and things like that. So I might be ringing you up just to confirm some of these things. So just at the end, you said the Abbeyfield Society. That was founded by who? Sorry.
Richard Cargom, CARR dash GOMM.
GOMM.
GOMM, yeah. There's an area in Bermondsey called the Gom Estates. He was born just down the road at Mansetter Lodge.
Oh,
incredibly.
Right.
He was a great chap. And when I was a vicar down in Creekmore in Poole, on a new housing estate there, a lot of the clergy got together because we were concerned about homelessness in Poole, of all places. And after we'd met for prayer one week, I got a letter through, well, it was a couple of weeks later, literally, from the boss of social services, because I was chairman of the social services advisory committee in Poole Borough, as a very young man, I have to say. And they said, we've got the Cargom Society, which was, he got the Abbeyfield Society, he got the Morpeth Society, which was for rich, lonely people. And what was incredible was that they said that the Cargom Society wanted to move into Poole, and would I like to chair a small group to look at the feasibility of doing that? And so we did it was a £500,000 project of a house for 7 homeless people, which is just on the edge of Poole Park, those who know Poole at all. And that was opened, I was asked to go back in 1990 for the opening of that, when Roger Royal went to open it. So I met Richard. We got on like a house on fire, and it was very strange that when I was going, I had some time off after leaving the Elliott, about 6 months, and then I read out this advert to Jane. She was driving, we were driving to Birmingham, and I read out the advert for they were looking for somebody to do this work with them. And Jane says, that sounds a bit like you, doesn't it? And I said, yeah, but I don't want any more full-time work. Anyway, that's what happened. And it's been an absolute delight, because the Abbeyfield model is now shared in many different countries. And it's a community-based, community-facing care where people can be in an atmosphere where they can flourish and find either old gifts that they have had in the past, or develop new gifts with support, and linking very much with the communities where they are. I mean, I hope one day that we'll have somewhere in this part of Leicestershire, because it would be absolutely great. There are a couple of houses at Loughborough, actually, not far away. But to have the privilege of going into the houses and homes, and then meeting some of the Cargom family, because Richard died several years ago, about 2010-11, and so that's the Abbeyfield connection. And I can talk a bit in questions, if you like, about the relationship between North Warwickshire and also Southwest Leicestershire in terms of health matters, because I feel very strongly about all that, as I know a number of you do as well.
Oh, I could just say about that. Well, they said when 2014, Bob was in hospital in the George Eliot. Following, he managed to fall over and break lots of bones, and he needed some. This is where Southwest Leicestershire and North Warwickshire sort of collide rather than meet seamlessly, because we needed some aids for him in the home, and so this lady came and she was taking it all down, and oh yes, we can get this for you, get that for you. Now, where do you live in Nuneaton? I said, no, we live in Hinckley. Oh, it's a completely different set of forms for that, she said. No, this is no good. And she tore everything up, went away, and we never saw her again. So when we came home, we had to start again because the two authorities just didn't speak to each other. But he survived. But yeah, so it's not always seamless.
Yeah, it's you know, the whole debate about seamless service and where social care and the acute side. There's a lot of us worked really hard, especially in the hospice world, where we could get away with a lot more because they never knew when I walked into sort of meetings with whether it's county council or whether it's with the health authority, whatever, what hat I got on. The dog collar scares some people, but not many in the health service. It was quite liberating to sort of say to them, well, have you tried this? Have you tried that? And we went across the boundaries without fear or anything else, because life is far too short for prevarication when people need extra support now, not, you know, and hospice care is very much about that and is very good at it on most days. It's just linking everything up. But you see, continuity is the battle of personnel and practitioners. The doctor's training system is great, but you get the juniors for 3 years in different hospitals, between hospitals, and then they go. So you get to know them over 6 months, and then they go off somewhere else. The continuity is and where you've got good consultants who really get the community thing. You can change all sorts of things, as we did with the GPs on Camp Hill. It was brilliant because we got a lot of work done in a very short space of time, but then couldn't get the funding to do the sort of research stuff to make sure that we could do that good practice and roll it out. But I could do with a little bit more time to sort of to spend time on that, but it just indicates that to have the privilege of seeing the whole of healthcare in mental health, in the community, in hospice and in the acute side, and working with amazing professionals. And on the support side, I had a consultant psychologist for 20 years who gave me and the team backup when we required it, when we had particularly difficult situations to deal with. And they're so professional and so good. So we made the most of that. And to see the George Eliot develop in the way that it did, and the good practice that was going on there, despite all the rumours and all the difficult things, which you've very, very succinctly actually talked about, despite the lack of resource in the north of Warwickshire compared to the south of Warwickshire. But that's another story. We had some great fun fighting those battles and using what we had extremely well in the circumstances. But room for improvement, yes, but we've come I hope if nothing else has been portrayed, is that we've come a very long way in a very short space of time, because the kit at the Eliot, when I first went there, I mean, we had an hour for lunch when I first went there, and we got a lot of work done with all the senior managers there. And then lunchtimes, what were lunchtimes? By the time I was sort of 3 or 4 years in, they disappeared. And we had a restaurant rather than a canteen, you know, all those sort of things. And the care of staff became a much bigger thing and much more talked about, and everything else. So we've come a long way in a very short space of time, I think.
Have you had experience very much with servicemen returning, or if they've been invalided out or injured in the service, or have retired and having difficulties returning to Civvy Street? I know Irene is conversant with a lot of problems in that respect, and she's worked with charities to help those sorts of people.
Yeah, a lot of our work was liaising with all the welfare organisations and getting grants when things were really difficult, and service people were waiting to go home and really hadn't got a lot of backup. We as chaplains are able to liaise certainly with those organisations and make sure the transition is okay. And the other thing I came across with service people was that those who'd been on active service on the front lines had to do some horrible things in their lives, and to have the privilege of holding their hands, which I did from time to time without giving anything away. One confession, because it was near end of life, was overheard by the person in the opposite bed, and he had a similar story, and they wanted to clear the decks. And when you've had experiences like that, you know, of a generation like myself, where I've not been involved in war, but in civil defence in terms of the police service and in terms of chaplaincy, you then have a different perspective on life as it is, and had enormous respect for these guys who never felt free, particularly free, to talk about what has happened at the front end. But in terms of welfare now, I hope there has been improvements, and it's a lot more high profile now, but have we got more to do? Is it Irene?
Yeah.
Have we got more to do locally, Irene?
Broader locally, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, there is a charity in Colville, and it picks up homeless ex-service people.
Right.
Who are often in a pretty bad state.
Yes.
They've been invalided out, or they've retired, and their home just breaks up.
Yes. Yes, it's extremely tough, and I think that in the Abbeyfield houses and homes, we've got a lot of ex-service guys and girls, and you know, hiding their light under a bushel, trying to encourage them to sort of share some of their stories, and also the gifts that they learnt during their service time, which they'd sort of lost because of not wanting to share any stories. We did a project in Solihull for the 60th anniversary of Abbeyfield, where I asked just 12 people to share with one of our apprentices, an admin apprentice, who we just talked to the people and asked them to give us a pen picture of themselves. And what we found out, whether they were service people or not, was that nobody else in the house or the home knew much about those they were living side by side with. But when they did, and they gave permission for their stories to be posted up, it just unlocked lots of doors. And there's one guy in a house down in Salisbury I went to, where he does botanical painting every day of his life. 93 years old when I met him, still going to seminars and things. but it had not been shared with the rest of the house. He was doing it quite singly in his room. These beautiful pictures. And he sent some up to Solihull because it was a new project, and put them on the walls. And it was absolutely fantastic. But these are, you know, everybody has a story to tell, don't they? And the wonder of it is unlocking those stories. And I sat down with the Cargom family in London one Sunday morning, as it happened. We had a long sort of 4 or 5 hours at it because I wanted to know, do an Abbeyfield assessment on Richard Cargom, all the things that they knew about him, about his favourite food and favourite music and all that sort of stuff. And we did 60 things you never knew about Richard Cargom for the anniversary. And for that family, it just unlocked a lot of the stories, because the grandchildren and the children hadn't actually got together and talked about these sort of things. And there was one of the most famous men in England at one point in terms of developing those sort of things, and had been on This Is Your Life and all that sort of stuff. It just enriched them so much. And the great thing that we can do in communities, like you telling the story of the heritage of Burbage and the wonderful plaques and everything else, gets people talking about things. I was talking to somebody in the Cotswolds recently who came to visit, who we met on our travels, and showed him around the village, of course, to the plaques, and they're wanting to do the same down in the Cotswolds, because they were fascinated with the storyboards around the village. And also, I mean, I'll never forget the day when Jane and I came round when they were unveiled around the village. I mean, that was a great day because it was sharing stories, which at the end of the day is what feeds community and enriches it and gives it hope for the future, really. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very, very good. Thank you. Yeah.
Right. Well, little did we know when we planned the programme last year that this would be such an appropriate talk, really. You know, on
the Heritage Rose,
the forefront of the news and everything. I've just been trying to Google it, but I can't find it. But if you know your scriptures, which I don't really, but there's something, I don't know whether it's in Psalms or something, it says, know thy heritage. So I'll have to try and look that one up. I got it on a Christmas card that John Hamlet sent me a few years ago.
Oh, right, okay.
I thought we'll have to look that one up.
I'll be interested to know what that is.
It's in the Bible somewhere, but I just can't.
So, yes, it wasn't the Proverbs one that I quoted.
No, I don't think it probably. I'm feeling it's in Psalms.
Psalms, yeah.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what it is. Yeah, but actually, I was in the Elliot on Monday. I had a little up in the Elliot, right. And I suppose this is moving on really. And I was thinking, well, you know, I must have had as many people look after me Monday as the original staff when the manor opened. You know, and I mean, to be fair, to say the Elliots took bad press. I was treated wonderful. I felt safe, clean, everything. It was in a brand new Nightingale unit.
Yeah.
In the, was it Major Thomas Moore unit? And there were 2 wards: the Mary Seacole ward, that's another story, and the Florence Nightingale ward. And it was absolutely brilliant. And I walked past the chapel on the way out, but of course I couldn't go in it because we had to keep ourselves to ourselves because we'd all passed the COVID test, you know. But it was, yeah, I've nothing to criticise it about at all. Naively, I thought that a hospital chaplain rocked up on a Sunday and did the service in the hospital chapel, and perhaps did a few, you know, like bedside, you know, end of life weddings and christenings, whatever. I've been amazed to find what's such a wide area that you covered, and how wonderful it is that you can do that, and it must have been such a rewarding job for you. And,
Extraordinary.
And yeah, it was. And thank you so very much. It's been lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
My pleasure. Thank you.
That. Right, so are we all going to go and put the kettle on now?
Yeah.
Come on, Carol, get the kettle on.
I will.
Yeah.
Enjoy your cups of coffee. It's
Yeah.
been no trouble making
I
them
think
at all.
special commemorations to Church Street, who have disappeared into the darkness.
No, yes, they are. Christine's lot, yeah.
Because they're sitting outside.
and the Garners in their dark. What's the matter? Ain't you got any money for electric stuff?
Have you gone, Eileen?
No, I can see somebody.
Christine. How Christine in the garden?
Yeah, and I can see.
Some of them are still muted though. That's why they can't. They haven't unmuted.
Can I also say, at 6:45 this evening, I thought this was going to be an interesting presentation because Edward couldn't get in.
Let me in.
I'm glad he's managed it then.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well done. Well done.
Yeah.
Well done.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Edward. Yes,
lovely.
and
Something completely different.
yes, after
we
Jane.
learned a bit about the history of the hospital, which I didn't know about, and also say the amount of ministry that you did. Can't believe it. Incredible. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye then.